Our text this morning is in James chapter 1. We're going to be looking at verses 2 through 4. Let's read these verses. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. When I was thinking about how to introduce this sermon this morning, I was thinking I would begin with some really well-known examples of endurance to help us understand what it is. Maybe some examples from mountaineering, expeditions, sports, or maybe examples from well-known Christians from the past, like Corrie ten Boom, Joni Eareckson, Elizabeth Elliot, many missionaries, many persecuted Christians. And yet, as I was doing that, I thought, there are plenty examples of endurance within our own congregation. Not names that are well known, famous throughout the world, but no less impressive for their perseverance and their faithfulness in trial and testing. As we look around, it's very easy, isn't it, for us here to find a parent of a special needs child who keeps loving, who keeps going, who stays available, enduring. We can find a spouse who's a caregiver for a husband or wife with dementia or Parkinson's or a terminal illness. Just keeping going, persevering, enduring. We can find a child, a young believer who perseveres in the midst of bullying and mocking and doesn't give up their faith. We can find a victim of abuse who's been tempted many times to give it all up, and yet they keep going, they keep enduring. We can find a widow or a widower who's lost their beloved husband or wife, and yet keep worshiping and worshiping and worshiping, enduring. We can find someone whose whole life, it seems, has been a life of trial and testing, just one after another, and still they come, and still they worship. You can think of maybe an elderly saint. They're in their 80s, their 90s. They've seen loved one after loved one, maybe even sons or daughters, pass away. And they've gone to their funerals and they keep going. They keep believing. They keep enduring. You can see a victim of injustice. Someone who knows it'll never be put right in this world, and yet they keep going. And they keep enduring. Maybe someone with depression or mental illness or one of the worst kinds of schizophrenia or psychosis. And yet, they keep going. They keep enduring. They keep believing. Endurance doesn't usually wear flashy clothes. It's not usually dramatic or attention-seeking. extraordinary endurance wears ordinary clothes and lives in ordinary houses and sits in ordinary pews and lives out a life of extraordinary faithfulness before God. And it's difficult. These tests push us to our limits at times, don't they? We may feel that they are actually weakening our faith. We may feel provoked to anger against God, maybe against others. We may find trials are actually a catalyst for sin. They weaken us so much that our moral armor is weakened and sin finds a way in. And yet, here we have in the book of James this stunning verse: "Count it all joy, my brothers." It's a term that was used to include male and female, my Christian family. Count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. And it doesn't say if, you notice. If you meet trials of various kinds. It's when. There's a certainty about this. Nobody escapes. It may take a long time. It may be later on in your Christian life, but they're coming. It's a when, not an if. And when it says count it all joy, it's not saying you should find these trials enjoyable. That you should go around saying, well, you know, pain's really a great pleasure. Not at all. The key word here is count. And it means reckon, view, interpret. And what James is doing here is he's wanting to bring before us different perspectives on trial. That when we look at trial through these perspectives, we can find a reason to rejoice. And so when we say count it all joy or enjoy this morning, that's what we're meaning. Not so much you've to call pain a pleasure, but use James, use his teaching to find a way to look at your trials from a different angle, a different perspective, and in doing so, alongside the pain, you will find reasons to also rejoice. How? How can I enjoy or find joy in trials when I can barely endure them? Because this actually is going beyond endurance, isn't it? There's an endurance which is just a grin and bear it. And yet here we're told a Christian can actually not just endure through trials, but actually somehow or other find joy in them. It seems impossible, doesn't it? It seems such a contradiction in terms, and yet that is what we are going to discover in this chapter. And the first teaching here is rejoice or find joy in trials, because varied trials result in a tested faith. Varied trials we get from the text here, where it says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. So, your trial is not going to be the same as mine. Mine is not going to be the same as yours. They're so varied. They vary in shape and size and frequency and duration in so many different ways. Sometimes it's one trial that lasts lifelong. Sometimes it's a repeated trial. Sometimes it's different trial after different trial. It's so varied. You mustn't look at others and envy them or feel sorry for them in that sense, because God has tailored the exact trial for his exact purpose in our lives. So trials are varied, and trials are testing. They test our faith. For you know that the testing of your faith produces. So here's the sequence. Trial produces a testing. And that testing produces a tested faith. A faith that has passed the test. None of us like tests, do we? We don't like exams. We don't like to have to sit down and try and recall information or perform to a certain level. These are very stressful times in our lives. And yet they're good for us. Without testing, we wouldn't actually know where we're at, whether it's in academics or whether it's in a sport that we enjoy. Testing's good, partly because it can reveal weaknesses. Now, if your faith or my faith is a false faith, it's not a real faith, it's a pretend faith, it's a traditional faith, it's a faith that just copies other faiths. If it's a false faith like that, and a test comes into our lives, and it reveals that our faith is false, that's a good thing. Better that I know I have a false faith through trial than to keep going with a false faith without trial. Because at least then I have opportunity to put it right or get right with God. But if it's a true faith and the test reveals that, if the test results in passed, and it'll never be 100%, but passed, that's a good thing. That's encouraging. Because then you can look at your faith and see, well, I've been through the mill here. This has been a grind. This has been devastating. And yet here, believe it or not, I still believe. In fact, I believe more than I believed before. How encouraging that is when a testing of our faith reveals a real faith. A faith that when tested passes. Find encouragement in that, James is saying. Rejoice in that. You think of a refiner who takes a piece of gold. It's very valuable to him. And does something strange. He puts it in a place which would destroy lots of other materials. He puts it in the fire. And if you didn't know what refining was about, you would say, stop. Don't do that. You'll destroy it. But the refiner knows. He is wiser. And he says, no, I'm going to do this, not because I hate this piece of gold and I have ill intent towards this piece of gold, but because I really treasure it and I really value it. And I really want to remove some of the dross. And I really want it to shine brighter and to look far more beautiful than it's ever looked before. And you and I know what that's like as we look around us in our church, in our lives. We see it, don't we? We see tested faith and we see a beauty. We see something stunning. We see that this person has far from given up the faith or turned their back on the faith, they've held on and they've kept going. And you can see it in their lives. There's a greater Christ likeness. There's a greater purity. There's a greater beauty. That's why James says, try and look at your trials in this way. The refiner is at work, and he is making you more beautiful by giving you a tested faith. But he doesn't stop there. He says, rejoice, because that tested faith results in steadfastness or patient endurance. This sermon is called Learning to Endure Suffering. Last week in the School of Suffering, we were in the class called Learning to Accept It. This goes a step further. We're learning how to endure it, how to persevere in it, how to be steadfast in it, whatever life throws at us. And this is what James goes on to say. He said, rejoice in the various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Steadfastness. It means patient perseverance. Patience is not a muscle most of us are born with, or if we are, it's tiny. It's a little pea. Like you see these cartoons, children, where somebody, tries to show off their muscle and it's just this little pea-shaped thing. That's most of us in terms of our patience muscle. But one thing this testing does is it grows the patience muscle. It develops this muscle into something more beautiful, something more powerful, something stronger. You know that the testing of your faith produces patience. We would love it, I think, if we could learn patience from a book. I went to seminary and there were no classes on patience. And if there is, there's no point in going. You don't learn patience from a book. There's no other way to learn it but through trial, through testing, disappointment in our family circumstances, non-stop temptation to unbelief or to a particular sin, the loss of children born and unborn. What a test. But that test is producing, it's productive. There's a great loss, no question, but James is saying here there's also a great gain. Don't lose sight of that. We can over-focus on the loss, but let me try and refocus your attention on what God has done in your life. He's built in you a bigger patience muscle. And that patience enables you to persevere and keep going steadfast. Now, what is this? What is this steadfastness? It's not passive. It's not like just somebody sitting there stoically, closing their eyes, gritting their teeth, and just being immovable. That's stoicism. It's not Christianity. Steadfastness is not just simply resigning yourself to your situation. Well, whatever will be, will be. No. Steadfastness is a very courageous, active, tenacious, holding on to the Lord when everything is saying, let go, give up. Steadfastness has a progress in it. It may be like millimeter by millimeter, inch by inch, but there's movement. You're not going backwards, and you're not staying still. Staying power. We all want out of it as quick as we can, don't we? Why has this lasted a week, a month, a year, a decade, 20 years, lifelong? How can I get out of this? What James is saying is try and reframe that and say, not how can I get out of this, but what can I get out of this? And this doesn't mean we never fall or fail. There are times, there are moments, there are events that just sweep the legs out from under us and leave us devastated on the ground. And it feels like there is no faith there at all. We fail. We fall. No question about it. Don't think that steadfastness in this life here below means you're just like a perfect sufferer. Not at all. What does mean is, when you fall and when you fail, what do you do next? You take that failure and you take that fall to the rock of ages, and you say, I'm sorry. I gave in to unbelief. I gave in to despair. I gave in to this temptation. I gave in to this mockery of my faith. I gave in to this worldly temptation. I confess that. I am weak. I seek your strengthening. Put me on my feet again. Put your hands behind my back and keep me supported as I seek to be steadfast again. So we'll all fail in this, but how do we respond to it is the big question. Endurance is not never failing. It's obeying when you feel exhausted. It's worshiping when you feel like an unbeliever. It's hoping when it seems there's nothing to hope in, when there's only despair. It's one of the most beautiful works of grace in the Christian life. And I see that beauty here. We don't need to look far, do we, to see that beautiful work of grace. You know, you go to a gym and you'll see the latest people with new resolutions. They've got their flashy lycra. They've got their leggings. They've got their T-shirts that somehow have been designed to show off as much muscle as there is there, and it seems even more than there is there. And they go onto these machines, and they're up and down with their legs, they're up and down with their arms, and they're full of energy and vigor. And way in the corner there's this person, they look very weak. They look frail, skinny, no muscle. And what they got, you remember the opening slide? They've got this huge rock above their head. And all they're doing is standing there. And they're swaying, and they can hardly keep it up. And nobody really pays them any attention. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy. No, everyone's looking at the latest gym trends and admiring what people can do with elastic bands and all this. God's looking at the person in the corner. enduring, 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 keeping going, keeping going, keeping going. Not at all the flash and all the fads, but at this seemingly weak believer who is barely standing, holding a weight that looks impossible, and yet they keep going. That is beautiful. Don't underestimate it. I know, some of you have said it to me. I feel I'm doing nothing. In my weakness, in my poverty, in my mental illness, in my old age. I feel I can't serve. I feel I don't do anything. You're doing everything that God is calling you to do. Your call is endurance and perseverance, and it's not unnoticed by God or by us. We admire you, we respect you, we value you, we love you. You encourage us, you inspire us, you show us what true faith is. You do this, you go from tested faith to steadfast endurance. But then, lastly, rejoice because patient endurance results in complete perfection. I just want to be brief here. Notice the words. Let steadfastness have its full effect. You get the chain? Trial, tested faith, steadfast endurance, and now, complete perfection. That you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, we all know we will not be perfect in this world. No matter how tested we are, it cannot produce perfection. But it can produce progress. And it can produce maturity. And while we will have complete perfection eventually in heaven, and God has designed this way of testing to get us to heaven and get us to that perfection, down here below, the word means maturity, a filling in of the gaps in our faith, a growing of what is weak. God is pushing us forward, leaving behind the childishness of faith and moving towards greater Christ-likeness in faith. That's what God is doing. Rejoice in that He is maturing you. He's moving you through the classes in the school of suffering. It's not wrong to pray for relief. It's not wrong to pray for healing. It's not wrong to pray for deliverance, but also add to the prayer, complete your work in me through this. You think of the piece of stone that the sculptor is working on, right? How do you think it feels if you're that piece of stone and all you get day by day is chisel blow upon chisel blow upon chisel blow? It feels like that guy hates me. It's just this hard, sharp instrument coming against me day after day after day. If I had life, I would strangle him. But from the sculptor's perspective, he's removing what's not necessary. And he's revealing the image that he wants formed in this piece of stone. And that's what he's doing. He is moving you slowly but surely towards perfection. The trials may ruin our perfect life, but they produce a more perfect you. How can I enjoy or find joy in trials when I can barely endure them? Rejoice in short-term trials. However long they are, they're not as long as eternity. Because of the long-term results. A tested faith, patient endurance, and progress to perfection. Balance the pain with these positive reasons for rejoicing. And who did this more than Jesus? Whose faith was more tested? Who showed more patient endurance? And who maintained perfection at every stage of his development in this life as a human? What reasons for worship and adoration? His perfectly tested faith, his perfect patient endurance, and his perfect maturing through age 0 to age 33-ish. That is what covers all our failures in this process. You know, there's a book, I've mentioned it many times over here in West Michigan, and nobody seems to know about it, or very few, but it's incredibly popular in Scotland. It's called The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. He was he made pots and pans. He was very uneducated. But he became a pastor, a very uneducated pastor, but a very powerful, brave pastor. Persecuted by church authorities, forbidden from preaching, ends up in prison, leaving his wife and children unprovided for. One of his children was a blind young girl. 12 years he was in prison, but there in that prison he wrote this book, The Pilgrim's Progress. I really recommend it to you. You can buy a book, the original. You can buy abridged versions of it if it's too long. There's a movie for it now, just the last few years, really well worth watching. And this is all about this pilgrim, this Christian journeying through life to heaven. And it's this chapter, these verses in animated form. He has test after test after test after test. The test of the weight of his own sin crushing him, and he endured. The test of the mockery of family and friends as he left the city of destruction and pointed his face to the celestial city, and he endured. The test of the swamp of despondency, where he was brought into a place of depression and despair, and still he endured. The test of a martyrdom of his best friend, faithfulness. The test of Vanity Fair, all the world's temptations. The test of persecution. The test of Apollyon, the great giant, the devil who fought him. The test of Doubting Castle, and still he endured. The test of spiritual drowsiness and sleepiness, and still he endured. Test after test after test, even to the very end, the test of fear as he's going through the shadow of the valley of death, and as he stands on the brink of the Jordan, the experience of death that brings him into heaven. He's terrorized again at last by the devil, and yet still he endures and gets to the celestial city. It's these verses in beautiful, memorable, unforgettable form. You'll find yourself in it. One time you'll read it, you'll see, oh, I'm that character. And then another time, as life goes on, oh, I'm actually this character. And it really helps you understand the Christian life and the different phases of it. and should inspire you to find joy even in these painful trials. Let's pray.